Welcome to a Healthy Push podcast. I'm Shannon Jackson, former anxiety sufferer turned adventure, mom, and anxiety recovery coach. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. And now I help people to push past the stuff that I used to struggle with. Each week, I'll be sharing real and honest conversations along with actionable and practical steps that you can take to help you push past your anxious thoughts, the symptoms, panic, and fears. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be. Okay, so I'm curious, have you ever wondered what the heck does being recovered actually look like? I know that I used to, and I used to wonder things like, will the anxious thoughts really ever just go away? Will I not have them anymore? Will I experience the symptoms and panic anymore? Will I feel like there are still things that I can't do? Will I actually be able to drive without thinking about panicking and how close the next exit is and if there are places to pull over and if there's a bathroom nearby, and the list goes on and on and on. And I know that you've wondered similar things because I get questions like these often. In fact, one of my Panic to Peace students just asked me last night in our live session, does it ever get to a point where those thoughts and feelings aren't there, or do you just learn to deal with them? So I want to share what being on the quote other side actually looks like, and I want to answer these questions for you because I want you to have a realistic view of recovery, and I know that sharing this stuff will give you lots of hope and inspiration and insights that will help you to heal and overcome. So let's start off by talking about anxious thoughts. So you all know how I feel about anxiety in general. Like, it's an emotion. We can't make it go away completely. It's always going to be a part of our lives, and that's okay, but it's not going to look how it currently does. And so the short and sweet answer is yes, sometimes I still have anxious thoughts, which makes sense because I'm a human being. Like when I had COVID, I had some anxious thoughts. Sometimes in certain social situations, which has always been a little bit overwhelming for me, I get anxious thoughts. Sometimes when I'm doing scary, exciting things, like when my husband says, let's go cliff jumping, I have anxious thoughts and anxious feelings. And this makes sense. Like, you can't get rid of anxious thoughts completely, and you don't have to, because obviously a lot of our anxiety helps to keep us safe. It serves a purpose. It helps to tell us some things that we really need to be aware of and know. But the anxious thoughts that you're probably wondering about, like when I'm in the store, when I'm driving, when I'm just sitting at home, like, are these anxious thoughts ever going to stop? Like, am I actually going to be at peace? And the answer is yes. You are not going to have the disordered anxiety that you do now, the thoughts of, what if something happens, all the what ifs, the thoughts that scare you and convince you that you need to do something, the intrusive thoughts, the thoughts that are just so frustrating and annoying and silly and don't really even make any sense, but cause you to feel a whole lot of things. Those types of anxious thoughts will dissipate and they will go away. But I will be very honest with you, sometimes, like very few and far between, I get anxious thoughts that I used to get back when I was struggling. And I want to explain this because I don't want you to feel defeated and I don't want you to be like, oh my gosh, so they're never going to go away. In my day-to-day, I am very free of the anxious thoughts. I do not get the thoughts that I used to get that pop into my head now. But when I'm doing some things, like, let me give you a really specific example because I think that this will be helpful. Me and my family took a trip to Arizona a couple of years ago. And while we were in Arizona, we decided to do this like safari ride. And to paint the picture for you, this safari ride involved us getting on this like bus. It was by no means a traditional safari ride. We were getting on a bus with like 40 to 50 people. We were crammed in. We were going into an enclosed space with a bunch of wild animals. And I remember before getting on the bus thinking, are you actually going to do this? And I was like, what? Where did that come from? Like, it kind of took me off guard. But then I was like, this makes sense. These are thoughts that I had for years. I struggled for 15 years, but with driving anxiety specifically, I struggled with it for a really long time. And I had a lot of these thoughts repetitively every single day. And so it really shouldn't have caught me too much off guard, but it kind of did. And I was just like, I'm getting on this bus and I'm doing this. This is going to be so fun. Like, we're going to get to feed giraffes. I was with, of course, my husband and my daughter, and just like, this is going to be a really cool experience. And then I had another thought. Well, what if something happens? You can't just get off of this thing. And I was like, and okay, that's okay. And, I remember feeling that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I am going to be trapped. Like, maybe I shouldn't do this. And I was quickly like, whoa, 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 Shannon, this sounds so familiar. You're feeling anxious. It's okay that you're feeling anxious. We're not going to do anything with these thoughts. We're not going to do anything about it. We're going to get on the bus and we are just going to do it. And you know what? We get into this gated area. They shut the, gates behind us. All of it just passed. No more thoughts, no more feelings. I was just very much in the moment, feeding celery to giraffes with my daughter, like seeing my daughter have such an amazing time. And it was just so amazing for me to be able to take that space that I needed to acknowledge, yeah, oh my gosh, I'm feeling a little bit anxious, but that's okay. I'm still going to do this because this is really important to me. This is so cool. Like, when do you get the opportunity to do something like this? You're freaking doing it. So I did it, and it was such an amazing experience. And I can't imagine that have going any other way than it did. Like, I knew I was going to get on that bus. I knew that I wasn't going to let anxiety decide. I knew that I wasn't going to let these anxious thoughts and the feelings take control. And that's just it. When you're recovered, you may still have these moments where you have some anxious thoughts that remind you of anxious thoughts you used to have for years and years and years. And it makes sense. But you are not going to take them so seriously. You are not going to do anything with them. You're going to be very objective and just let them pass. And you're going to continue to do the thing. All right, now let's shift over and talk about the symptoms. And it's very similar to the thoughts. Like, it's very few and far between that I experience the symptoms of anxiety. But usually if I do, it's very directly correlated to situations where it makes sense for me to be feeling some feelings of anxiety. But like along with that bus ride, the safari ride, I experienced some symptoms. Like, I remember feeling that whoosh, that tingling. I remember feeling really hot. That was similar to what I experienced when I was struggling. But that's also a response that makes sense. I had some really intense thoughts. It started to lead to some feelings. That fight or flight was like right there, but then it didn't go there because I knew how to respond to it in a healthy way. But I will say sometimes, like, I feel a sensation, like my heart flutter, or I have stomach pains or cramps, and I notice it, and I might have some thoughts about it because, again, for years and years, I responded to things like this with alarm bells, right? We need to do something. We are not okay. Something bad is going to happen. We're going to panic. We need to not panic. Like, rein it in. Years and years of having that response, right? So it makes sense that sometimes I'm going to have a pause and have some thoughts about it, but I don't do anything with the feelings or the thoughts. I just acknowledge it, and then I keep on with what I was doing. I don't Google. I don't, seek reassurance. I don't tell myself all these crazy stories or go down the what if rabbit holes, I like to call them. I don't alter what I'm doing. I just keep on living in the present moment. I keep on doing what I was doing before the sensations, the feelings kicked in. And I know that you might be like, that doesn't seem possible. Like, how do you do that? And it will happen. You are capable of this too. I am not some crazy rare exception, but it's just a lot of practice, allowing the thoughts, the feelings to be there and to not do anything about them. So talking about panic attacks, I've shared this quite a bit, so I'm not going to dive too much into this, but over the course of my recovery, I've had one panic attack. So one panic attack in 7 years, and I used to have them every day, if not multiple times a day. And this one panic attack was really centered around a time I had COVID. My nervous system was very overwhelmed. It made total sense that I ended up having a panic attack. But again, I was not attached to it. It happened. I was not going back into the cycle of, I need to prevent that from happening again. Oh my gosh, what does this mean about me, my recovery? Like, I don't want that to happen again. it happened. I recognized there was a pretty good reason why it happened. And I just kept on living and making the healthy decisions and taking care of myself. And that was another big part of it, right? I acknowledged I probably wasn't taking care of myself as best I could. I probably wasn't getting enough rest and just general support to myself. So it was a good nudge of like, I need to get back to some of that stuff. But another part of this that I want you to really recognize that I think will be helpful is through the course of my recovery, like when I was recovering, there were times that I did have panic attacks. And sometimes it was very few and far between that I'd have them. Like I would go weeks without having one and then I would have one. But I just knew I had to allow it to happen. And I couldn't go down the rabbit holes of why and trying to prevent it from happening again and try to figure anything out. Like I just had to let it be and keep moving on. So it's not that, necessarily that one day you're going to wake up and they're going to completely disappear and you're not going to have them ever again, but they will slowly start to dissipate and disappear. So in general, I really don't feel like now being recovered, there's anything that I can't do because of anxiety. Like I fully live my life. I do all the things that I want to do. Like this past weekend, we just got back from a trip to Florida. We had to drive from Maine to Boston, get on a flight that was 3.5 hours. We got to Florida. We landed in Miami. We had to drive from Miami to the Florida Keys, which was a couple of hours. I did it all without anxiety. No anxiety, no panic, like flying, driving, doing all the things that used to cause me to feel so much anxiety. I was just telling my Panic to Peace students the other night, I'm going to get emotional about this. I struggled for so many years feeling so freaking anxious and scared and not wanting to do these things. And now being to this place where no anxiety. Like I can get on an airplane, not a second thought. I shouldn't say not a second thought because I am one of those people that I get on a flight and I think there hasn't been a plane crash in a while. Maybe we're due for a plane crash. And like, that's just a very human thought. I have a very human brain. I know many of you have probably had that thought too, but like, I don't take it seriously. Nope, we're just going to get on the airplane and it's going to take us to this amazing trip. But truly, like no anxiety. I just got in the car, I drove, we got to the airport, rode on the airplane, like got to our destination. We had so much fun on our trip. We stayed at 2 different places. When we were in the Keys, we did a kayaking tour, which I highly recommend if you're ever in the Keys, do a kayaking tour. It was a 2-hour tour out on the ocean, just me, Amelia, and Adam and our tour guide. And we went through mangroves, like out on the ocean through mangroves. We saw so many cool fish and jellyfish, and I held the jellyfish. And like back when I was struggling, of course, I would think, I am not doing that. Getting in a kayak, going out in the middle of the ocean, 2.5 hours, like, are you crazy? But it's something that I did without a second thought. Just, this is going to be so dang cool. And it was so dang cool. And like, no anxiety, no panic, no anxious thoughts, just pure bliss and freedom. And it was really amazing. So we did lots of things on our vacation and I just had such a good time. And it's just so cool to be in this place where like I get to travel and I get to drive and I get to do my day-to-day stuff and I get to drive far distances and all of that without anxiety tagging along. And I know it's really hard to believe that it's possible, but it is possible. Like even if you don't believe it, even if you can't, you've been trying to convince yourself it's possible, it's okay. You don't have to convince yourself. It's going to happen. I didn't believe for a long time that the anxious thoughts, that the symptoms, the panic, all of it would just go away. Like I always thought it is going to be a part of my life in some capacity. And I was so wrong. And I'm glad that I was so wrong. So I just want to give you a glimpse because obviously I travel, I hike, I do bigger things, but that's not the stuff that's really cool to me. The stuff that's really cool to me is that I just live my day-to-day life now without the anxious thoughts and feelings and symptoms and panic attacks. Like I take Amelia to preschool every day. I work from home. I'm alone at home all day, something that used to be hard for me. I go grocery shopping. I go out to dinner. I do so many weekend adventures with my family and friends. We go on trips. I go hiking and skiing. Like, I drive. I go places. I do things without fearing or preparing for what might or could happen. Like, my husband always says, I have no idea how you went from being so anxious and wanting to plan and prepare and have everything figuring out to not planning or preparing or figuring anything out. Like, it's so hard for him because he's such a planner and a person that loves to like figure things out and have an itinerary. And I'm just like, we'll figure it out. We'll see. Like, I just don't want to book a hotel for the last night because what if we really like the Keys, and what if we want to stay there another day, or what if we want to go explore somewhere else? And he's just like, oh my gosh, like, how did you go from being so anxious to just like, whatever, we'll just see. But it's so freeing and I think serving that I stepped into this way that I now go about things, where I don't try to plan and prepare, and that I'm not overanalyzing and thinking about all the things, and I just let there be loads of uncertainty, and really amazing and fun things always happen when there are so many uncertainties. And I just cherish how much I have a healthy relationship with uncertainty, because I used to fight it in every capacity. I used to always try to make things certain. I used to always try to have so much control. I used to always make sure that I was going to be okay. And now I just have this knowing I am going to be okay, and I don't have to know. I don't have to know what it's going to look like. I don't have to know all the things. And it's so peaceful and freeing to be in this space. So truly, the things that used to be so hard for me, they aren't hard anymore. I just do them and I don't think about it. And I know it probably sounds crazy, but it's true. And I know, again, you might not believe me, and I get it, but I promise I would not lie to you. I would not sit here and tell you these things if it were not true. And, telling you the story of us going to Florida, I have to include this because one of my Panic to Peace students from the last round, I actually interviewed her on my podcast, Maria. And, back when I interviewed her, she was like, Shannon, I still don't believe that full recovery is possible. Like, I really don't believe that I'll get to the point where I don't have the anxious thoughts, and that I don't have the feelings, and that I don't have the panic, and that I'm not worried about bathrooms and all the things. And this past week, she went to Disney with her husband and her 2 kids. And this makes me so emotional because I am just so grateful that I get to help people show themselves how capable they are and live their freaking lives, and just reach out to me and tell me with so much joy what they've done. So she flew on an airplane. She rode a bus several times each day. She had to go on some long drives, and she did amazing. She was like, Shannon, it is so weird. It feels so weird. Like, how am I here? And it's just that proof, right? That I know you might be in that space where you're really questioning and you're really doubting, and you can't see that recovery is possible. But I want to reassure you, like, it does happen, and it happens slowly without you even noticing it. Like, you just slowly become less attached to your thoughts and your feelings. You become less attached to planning and problem solving and figuring out. And you become less attached to looking for safety and for help outside of yourself. And you just slowly start to feel more at peace and more confidence. And it's just such a beautiful thing when it happens, because you don't even really realize it. It just happens. So I really want to encourage you, even if you don't believe it right now, that this is possible, that this can happen for you. I want you to allow the possibility for it to happen, because I'm no different than you. My past student, Suzanne, who is living her life and traveling, and she actually just had a baby, which is just beyond amazing. And Maria, who is living her life and traveling again and doing things with her family and not having the anxious thoughts and panic and fears. Like, we are no different than you. You are capable of recovering we were once in that space where we didn't believe it. We couldn't see it. We thought, never me. So if you're in that space, I want you to know it's okay. But you can still recover even though you don't believe it, even though you might not know how the heck you're going to get there. You are capable. So I just want to leave you with this, and it's really important to keep this in mind. Like, being recovered doesn't mean that you never experience anxiety. Like I said, when I really started to recover, I still had some anxious thoughts, some symptoms, some panic attack, and that's okay. That's part of healing. That's part of the recovery journey. And even now, like I said, sometimes I have thoughts that pop into my head that remind me of old thoughts that I used to have. And sometimes it carries some feelings, but that's it and nothing more. And, sometimes I feel a sensation or symptom and it makes me go, but that's just it. And it doesn't go anywhere beyond that. And it's really because now I know how to respond to these things in a healthy way so that they don't have me going down rabbit holes and spiraling and questioning myself and my recovery. And you'll get there more quickly by not trying to get rid of anxiety altogether or trying not to experience it. Remember, anxiety doesn't just go away, but your relationship with it changes. That is the really important thing to remember. You're not going to completely get rid of your anxious thoughts. Don't have this be a goal. It doesn't need to be a goal. And you might experience symptoms or panic attacks sometimes, and that's okay. And you're going to feel scared sometimes for seemingly no reason, or feel anxious for no reason, and it's okay. But you'll no longer allow these things to mean anything or keep you from living and choosing to do the things that you value and the things that are important to you. So right now, if you have your sights set on never feeling anxious or never experience the symptoms or a panic attack, I get it. It makes sense. You want them to go away. You don't want to experience them anymore. But instead, I want you to just set your sights on living in the right now. Living in the right now and responding in a healthy way when these things do pop up. And focusing on not giving anxiety so much dang attention. So if you're like, Shannon, all this is great. I feel so hopeful and inspired and this has been amazing. But if you're like, I need to know some steps, like I need to know what I can do, I want you to check out my master classes. I have 2 master classes. They're both just $75. I have one on overcoming the symptoms and panic attacks, and I have one on overcoming driving anxiety, and I have lots more to come. But these master classes are filled with lots and lots of practical tips and tools to help you to respond to your thoughts and feelings in a healthier way, to not give anxiety so much attention, to start practicing the things that will actually help you to heal and recover. So you can check those out. I will put them both in the show notes. And if this episode has been helpful for you and has resonated with you, please share it with somebody. And if you haven't already taken the time, please rate and review my podcast. I super appreciate any feedback that I get. I always love to read. I read every single one, and it means so much to me. So until next time, my friend, you know the deal. Keep taking healthy action. I hope you enjoyed this episode of A Healthy Push. If you want more, head on over to ahealthypush.com for the show notes and lots more tips, tools, and inspiration that will support your recovery. And if you're hoping for me to cover a certain topic, be sure to join my Instagram community at A Healthy Push and let me know in the comments what you want to hear next.